Put the kids to bed. It was black and blue on the ground for the Baltimore Ravens. 299 rushing yards as a team. Derrick Henry leading the way with 186 of his own. That his longest, a 44-yard scamper to keep a second-half Pittsburgh surge out of reach, with Baltimore moving on. Back in studio, Joe Musso alongside the two-time champ Bryant McFadden. Ryan Wilson here to offer his thoughts as well, and it starts and ends with the ground game. We lambasted this Ravens team for what they did a year ago, 16 rushes for 80-some yards.
Yes.
Todd Monken said, you want to see a run game? How's 299? What did you see in the ground game, the assertiveness from the Ravens over this 60 minutes?
Just how well they executed and the mentality. They were the bullies in the trenches. They were the guys that were moving grown men against their will. And then when you allow a running lane for a guy like Derrick Henry in those type of conditions, good luck in trying to slow down that snowball that's coming downhill. But the thing also, too, Ryan, that I really love with the Baltimore Ravens is how they started this ball game. They were putting the football in Lamar Jackson's hand. And he was running, like I said, he had 4 rushing plays, that he was taking the football and he was running. That's what you need to see, because to Joe's point, the last time we saw Baltimore in the playoffs, the AFC Championship game from a year ago, they turned their back on the ground and pound attack. That has to be the mentality moving forward, because they're a better team when they're running the football.
B-Mac, you get the sense that John Harbaugh said to Todd Monken, if you don't run the ball every single play, I'm going to throw you out of the booth. And, Joe, you talked about the 16 rushes last year in that Kansas City playoff loss. 9 rushes on the first drive. And as I click my abacus around here, 50 total rushes in this game. And the Steelers, you know, the funny thing is, B-Mac, I'm watching this game thinking this is what the Steelers used to do to other teams. They would just run it down your throat time and time again with Jerome Bettis. There were no answers, and the teams just had to sit there and take it. The first quarter felt like watching the fourth quarter of Jerome Bettis dragging guys up and down the field that didn't want to be hit. And look, man, the game was over at halftime, and it was a nice little comeback and made for a fun few minutes there. But it was clear who the better team was on the field. It is clear who the likely MVP is going to be. They ran read option, they ran QB draw, and the Steelers, they game planned for it, but there are no answers when you got the two-headed monster that is Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry just having their way with what looked like they were playing against a JV team.
It was unbelievable stuff, and quite believable. The word often used improperly here, but it's to be celebrated what this team is doing on the ground and maybe where they're trying to go, because we could sit here and we could wag our finger at the Pittsburgh Steelers, but this is a Ravens team and a franchise and a quarterback trying to shake some of that playoff stink as well. They put one in the win column here, and they 10x the Steelers on the ground. The Steelers ended with 29 rushing yards, 299 to 29, the third largest disparity in playoff history. Mac, when we talk about mentality for one team, it needs to be talked about for the other as well, because at halftime we said it, 5 consecutive playoff games. It's a Pittsburgh team that's trailed by at least 14 points at half. Something has to be said here about getting off the bus. Who does that fall on?
I mean, collectively, everyone involved. Of course, Mike Tomlin as the head coach, his entire staff, and then the players, because the sense of urgency has to be there. And with this playoff letdown, it's a little different. Because, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't recall any other playoff team from the Pittsburgh Steelers, right, that have went into the playoffs losing 4 straight games in the regular season. While you look at how bad they were in the regular season, one would think the sense of urgency would be put on display, especially to start the game off. But to your point, Joe, they were sleeping at the wheel. They didn't even play around with their food. They didn't even look at their food. It was just there. And in terms of playoff football, especially when you're on the road, you have to get off to fast starts to be able to snatch the momentum away from the home team. And then in terms of the execution defensively, read option left, read option right, RPOs, they just decided not to cover Lamar Jackson. Everyone was crashing in on Derrick Henry. Someone's supposed to be responsible for the quarterback, especially with an offense that has been known to do these said things. And this is an offense that you know fairly well being divisional foes. So this was a letdown, but you look at how they finished the season, Ryan, I really felt like I would see a different team in terms of energy, execution, because anytime you lose, 4 straight, and you get into the playoffs, one would think you would be a little more dialed in.
B-Mac, I think it was Maya Angelou who said, when someone shows you who they are, believe it. Those last 4 games, turns out that's who the Steelers were. And who did they play? The Eagles, the Ravens, the Chiefs, and the Bengals. Three of those teams are in the playoffs. The fourth almost made it. A couple things to keep in mind here. Russ Wilson is not a guy that's going to sit in the pocket like he's Joe Burrow and get through his reads. If the first read isn't there, we've seen it time and time again, he's going to bail and either throw the ball away or take a sack. Those 3 games that they lost, the first 3 games that they lost, no George Pickens. And the running game has been spotty all season. So when you don't have your best player to stretch the field, the running game isn't there, Russ doesn't have a chance. George Pickens no-showed in that Week 18 game against the Bengals, and he wasn't used in the first half or targeted very often, and then he got red hot. So everything has to be right. And it feels like almost to an extent that Mike Tomlin is the victim of his own success. He wins just enough to get him out of range from getting the quarterback that they need in a post-Big Ben world, but he's so good at coaching these guys up that they buy in, and they end up winning 9-10 games a year. So they're almost stuck in this circle of mediocrity or just a little bit better than mediocrity. I don't know what the solution is until you get a quarterback, because Mike Tomlin is one of the best coaches in football perhaps ever, but you're not going to win a Super Bowl unless you have a Big Ben-type guy walking through that door.
Yeah, Mac, I mean, we've been talking about this. You look at that line drawn in the sand of what is when, and you see some trickle over from the Cowher era where all that success was had, and you've seen some struggle since. And to Ryan's point here, it is a expertly coached football team, but one with a very high floor and what has been established as a very low ceiling as well. They'll get you to playoff football. They won't get you much from there. The quarterback situation now becomes a question, as this was certainly an open tryout year for the Steelers, but this night belongs to the Baltimore Ravens and a team that's trying to move forward and do more than they did even on just this night. Mac, is this the formula? I know no Zay Flowers in this one and hopeful to have him back for the divisional round, but how much should they depart from this 50 totes on the ground, or is this their route to New Orleans?
I think it should be their route because they have 2 great players that are very good at running the football. And to your point, we forget that Zay Flowers wasn't in this ball game, right? He's the best.
Made it a little easier for Todd Monk. He's like, yeah, let's just run it.
Yeah, we think about that. Viewers, you forgot Zay Flowers did not participate, and the Baltimore Ravens did not miss him. But, yeah, I think when you – and this is what we thought when they made the move, Ryan, to sign Derrick Henry. We felt like Derrick Henry would be impactful throughout the season, but his biggest impact would be in January football. Playoff football. It's cold. He's athletic. He's fast. He's powerful. Look how he wore down the Steelers defensively. By the second half, those guys were tired of running into Derrick Henry, and he was just getting going. So if you stay the course with this mentality, who knows where you can end up? Because one thing I do know, in years past, when you turn your back on the running game, that got you out of the postseason. So if you stay the course and allow Derrick Henry to get things going, the entire offense is better. And oh, by the way, Lamar Jackson is still Lamar Jackson. You still have to account for Lamar Jackson. I mean, you look at his numbers, pedestrian-like numbers for Lamar Jackson, but also effective. 175 yards through the air, 16 of 21, 2 touchdowns, 81 yards. It was an easy night, so impactful, though.
Yeah.
Very, very impactful. And when you look at what Derrick Henry has done, I mean, this is a team in the AFC. You look at some of the top dogs in the AFC. If they can keep things rolling, and oh, by the way, with their defense, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, and I think that last thing you mentioned, B-Mac, is incredibly important. Zach Orr took over for Mike McDonald, who went to Seattle to be the head coach. It took a little time for that defense to get acclimated to what Zach Orr wanted to do, and that defense is flying all over the field. Matabike is playing out of his mind. Those edge rushers who are incredibly speedy are starting to get after it. Van Noy sort of refound himself in the back end. They have Kyle Hamilton balling out. Marlon Humphrey's playing like it's 5 years ago. And the list goes on and on of guys stepping up, making plays. Didn't even mention Nate Wiggins, their first-round pick, who's had some impactful plays this season as well. And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but if the Bills happen to win tomorrow, it's going to be Ravens-Bills. And I love the idea of that rematch of the 2 MVP frontrunners to see what they have. Because, B-Mac, your point is an important one. The last time the Bills and the Ravens played, it was the same stat line, similar stat line for Lamar Jackson. He still scored 3 touchdowns, and they still won convincingly. So you can win all different sort of ways when you have the best player in the league, or one of the best players in the league, Lamar Jackson, and a defense that can help you out, and you have Derrick Henry, and you didn't even have Zay Flowers tonight. Hopefully get him back for next week's game.
And this and that, and they move on to Ryan's point. If it is the Bills, you will get Houston and the Chiefs. You will get the Ravens and the Bills. If it is Denver, you get Denver traveling to Kansas City and Houston traveling to Baltimore. We'll see how it all plays out in the AFC as we have 2 down. The 5 and 6 seed say sayonara on Saturday night. You can say goodbye when Lamar Jackson's toting that rock. Now, the all-time leading rusher in the playoffs as a quarterback with 602 yards. And we ain't done counting.